Okay, well, Diptyque Laurent joins me now to take us through what's making headlines in the French papers. Diptyque, let's start first with these testimonies really emerging from the Islamic State group's terror regime in Syria.
Inside the Islamic State group's prisons, that's the headline from the front page of the French Catholic paper this morning, La Croix. They're really looking at the first emerging witness statements that provide for some pretty terrifying insight into how these clandestine prisons were run by the jihadists at the peak of their regime. One man called Hussein, for instance, spent 3 months and 17 days during the summer of 2014 in one such underground jail in the Syrian city of Raqqa. The 39-year-old was tortured day and night for a whole week. Torture was worse than death. That's what he's quoted as saying by La Croix. He was suspended by his hands and legs, beaten to a pulp. All of this until they got what they wanted out of him, which was a confession to stealing some money from a woman. So that's what it was all about. Then they released him, but La Croix does note that there are thousands of other people who are still missing. A young Syrian has even created a Facebook and Twitter page in the hopes of getting some information about these people who to date are still missing. The victims accuse the Kurdish and coalition forces that liberated Raqqa of basically turning a blind eye and not really doing much to help the plight of these missing people and their families. So a lot of anger boiling there as well.
Oh, it's just so hard to accept that this is the reality happening, such harrowing stories. Well, let's move on though, Diptyque, and there is an op-ed piece written in Le Monde newspaper today creating quite a lot of controversy.
If there's one thing you read today, it's probably this article, because it is making waves here in France. It's making waves across the world for its content, really. This article was written by 100 prominent French women, including the actress Catherine Deneuve, basically condemning the Me Too movement as puritanism that has essentially blurred sexual harassment and flirtatious behaviour. Obviously, I'm not quoting word for word, but that's the essence of the article. I do quote from this article: "A woman in the same day can manage a team of people and enjoy being the sexual object of a man without being qualified as a, quote, whore, or as a vile accomplice of the patriarchy." They go on to say, I quote, "A woman can fight for equal salary but not be traumatized by someone who brushes up against her in the metro, even if that is a crime."
How have people been reacting to this letter?
Well, there's a lot of indignation, a lot of outrage, as you can imagine, because that Me Too movement is full of emotion, really, and it did take a long time to sort of get speed. Well, this piece, Le Figaro says, has sparked a wave of indignation, particularly from feminist groups who remind the authors of this piece that 1 in 6 women are harassed or raped in their lifestyle. This is no laughing matter, essentially. They call the piece revolting. Now, the French Minister for Gender Equality, Marlène Schiappa, has also responded by saying, rather sarcastically, that she has no knowledge of a man who's been fired for, quote, inadvertently touching a woman. In other words, her reaction really is that they've completely missed the whole point of the Me Too movement.
Okay, well, let's move on once again. And Emmanuel Macron is leaving China and heading for Rome this Wednesday to meet with other European leaders there, to meet notably and talk about migration, an issue in which France and Italy don't really see eye to eye.
Well, their diplomatic relationship has been strained in recent times over the approach to Europe's migrant crisis. Emmanuel Macron's purpose in going to Rome is also to, quote, reheat the Franco-Italian relationship on this 2-day trip, a relationship obviously strained right now. L'Opinion, the right-wing paper, talks about how rising numbers of migrants arriving in Italian cities has even seen a return of racist and nationalist slogans that are particularly prevalent in the city of Genoa. There's one place, though, in Italy that's actually thriving due to the influx of migrants, and that is the island of Sicily. Libération has a really interesting piece about how more and more migrants arriving on the island has actually allowed the island to access government grants. It's boosted the local economy, it's boosted jobs, it's boosted tourism. In fact, Sicily is flourishing thanks to migrants, and they say they're more than happy to have the migrants here, that the migrants are part of the Sicilian landscape, part of their community. Indeed, the island was badly hit by a mass exodus of people and unemployment, but migrants, it appears at least here, are helping turn things around.
Indeed, there's been a number of Italian villages that seem to have openly adopted the new arrival, saying that it's bringing life back to abandoned towns. Now, also making headlines, I imagine, is that Macron's trip to China. He's wrapping it up today. What are the papers making of the visit?
Well, it's a visit, of course, that many see as a charm offensive. He was there to woo the Chinese officials and build stronger diplomatic and, in particular, economic ties, as you said, signing a whole host of business deals in the process. Libération, the left-leaning paper, is talking about Chinese internet giants like Alibaba, which they say are just as powerful as Apple and Google, and now, thanks to this visit, are sort of eyeing their part of the European market now. They want their hands on the European market. Who's afraid of the Chinese giants, Libé asks on its page, really evoking the protectionism that the Chinese government may be following. Now, you see this cartoon here from Libé's cartoonist Willem, who says Chinese President Xi Jinping is saying here that here is a Silk Road, to which Emmanuel Macron says, I hope it's a two-way road. And President Xi says, well, if we want it to be that way, it will be. So really, the idea being that China still holds the cards.
Now, Dipti, some papers are picking up on anger among Chinese officials as to Emmanuel Macron's tardiness during the trip.
That's right. It appears the French president may need a watch, or at least somebody who's keeping his eye on the time, because he took a bit too much time in meeting with people in one city, the city of Xi'an. The street paper 20 Minutes reports that this might have exasperated Chinese officials who adhere to a very strict punctuality regime. He's promised to come back to China at least once a year, so here's hoping he'll be a bit more punctual next time.
He can make up for that. Okay, Chica Laurent, for the wrap-up of the French papers, thanks indeed for that. You'll be back a little bit later on in this live from Paris edition with the international papers.